On June 24th, 2022, 1 year ago today, I watched one of the most interesting films I've ever seen in my entire life, Mortdecai. I need to sincerely apologize because I wrote and recorded this entire video and I didn't even realize that it's actually July and not June. So, this is a 2015 comedy about an art dealer starring Johnny Depp, Goop CEO Gwyneth Paltrow, Ewan McGregor, Paul Bettany, Jeff Goldblum, and Olivia Munn. A very stacked cast, all things considered. It's a colorful, bouncy adventure comedy that also tries to balance a bit of a mystery plot as well. You're probably looking at this footage and thinking that this is a movie made for 8-year-olds. Then the movie hits you with...
Feel me.
Oh, yes.
No, not there, stupid. Here.
What the fuck? You just fell for my Riddler's trick. Gabby, you must feel so stupid right now. This is a rated R adult comedy with maybe like 3 or 4 sex jokes and nothing else that would reasonably appeal to an adult audience. It's like an adult comedy in the same way Gex is an adult comedy, where every joke is written tailored specifically for children. There's a scene where Ewan McGregor wants to eat cheese, but the cheese he's given is bad cheese, so he says,
Oh, and incidentally, I asked for some cheese, not an instrument of biological warfare.
This is then immediately followed up with a scene where you can see Gwyneth Paltrow having sex with Johnny Depp. I'm not saying adults shouldn't watch silly stuff, but when your own movie puts the bar at people who are old enough to get a divorce, it just feels very odd that this is the product you're given. It's like this movie is trying to please 2 completely different audiences who have no correlation with each other. After I watched this movie, I pondered deep philosophical ideas and concepts, and I came out the other side with what I call Mortdecai Paradox. Over the course of a year, this theory has gone through a lot of different definitions and interpretations. High-class scholars from around the world have even contacted me to discuss the implications of the Mortdecai Paradox. However, today I think I have a pretty solid definition of this occurrence. Mortdecai Paradox. Noun. A situation in which a piece of media attempts to try several things and ends up contradicting itself literally or subtextually. Now, there are a lot of situations in which something can undergo the Mortdecai Paradox. Like Mortdecai, for example, contradicted itself by trying to be an adult comedy with childlike humor. It completely confuses itself by trying to please 2 completely juxtaposing audiences. But just because something does several things at once doesn't mean it experiences the paradox. You can do several things at once and still be cohesive. It's when you begin to refute your own purpose by doing a bunch of completely different things that it really starts to get messy. I really hate to do this, but a lot of the Star Wars movies and shows experience the Mortdecai Paradox. Too many of the recent Disney stuff has kind of screwed themselves by trying to be satisfying in both narrative and spectacle. Usually spectacle that is requested by the worst part of the Star Wars community, and Kenobi is no different. The show was presented as like a deep dive into Obi-Wan Kenobi, like a character study that would dive into his psyche before the events of the first Star Wars, and yet that's like the last thing the show did. I don't want to argue too much over the quality of this show since a lot of people like this series for different reasons, but I think you can at least hear me out when I mention the amount of shit it tried doing. The return of Hayden Christensen, trying to put Leia in there, having a rematch between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. It got really messy when a lot of these were obviously very requested features, but didn't really service the narrative. That rematch between these 2 old-ass dudes poking sticks at each other, as sophomoric as it is one of the best scenes in the first Star Wars film, and it's made even more poignant when the last time they fought each other, they were doing these like fucking karate flips and doing some like wave dashing and shit. I don't even know. That effect is kind of ruined when so many people wanted to see that rematch though. You lose what made those scenes so special when you listen to what the fans want. That is why, if you ask me, this series suffered the Mortdecai Paradox. It contradicted its own purpose by backtracking and forcing itself to add a lot of fan-requested stuff to please as many people as possible. My friend said it best when she said, Kenobi is so torn with being fan-requested bullshit that it eventually becomes fan-requested bullshit. And I never told her this, but I actually stole that from my Letterboxd review. For this next one, I'm going to have to take you guys way back. Boba Fett is my favorite fictional character ever. At his core, he is a homage to the westerns of Italian director Sergio Leone, my favorite director of all time. I remember I made an entire video about this when I was younger. His entire mystique was modeled after the Man of No Name, played by Clint Eastwood, one of my favorite actors of all time. When they announced the Book of Boba Fett, I was ecstatic. Star Wars was moving into a much grittier direction following The Mandalorian, and it was being directed by Robert Rodriguez, who also loves Sergio Leone. So every card was on the table to turn this into one of the coolest Star Wars shows ever. There was no conceivable way that Disney could fuck it up. The Book of Boba Fett is a show that has no idea what it's doing. This is what a lot of the Disney Star Wars stuff does. It shows you cool ideas, and then it just never expands on it. Remember when I said Boba Fett was made to pay homage to the mystique of Clint Eastwood? To honor this, they portray him as a quippy MCU character who says funny one-liners. But the final fucking name is when halfway through the show, they replace Boba Fett with the Mandalorian, and he steals the spotlight for the rest of the season. And that has to be maybe the biggest slap in the face to every fan of this character. When there's an episode of this show where the title character doesn't even show up once, especially when it's a show about a character who many thought died 40 years ago, then I think you're doing something wrong. I mentioned earlier that the Mortdecai Paradox can be literal instead of subtextual, and this is what I mean. When you blatantly attempt to be a show about Boba Fett, but you backtrack on your own idea and instead focus on an entirely different character to save face, I think that's a pretty textbook example of a paradox. It's that attempt to please as many audiences as possible, like Mortdecai, that causes that paradox. Now I'm gonna stop talking about this show before I get a fucking heart attack. I still remember the prime era of FNAF, back when things were implied more than confirmed. Remember when everyone played the first FNAF and the missing kids was more like a backdrop than the main focus? That made it so much more ominous. That's when horror is at its best, if you ask me, when things are implied. The idea of these murderous animatronics actually holding the souls of angry spirits is what fueled a lot of the excitement for FNAF at first. New FNAF, I don't even know what's happening anymore. So the killer, as we all know, is the purple guy, or William Afton as he's been revealed. And the reason why he kills these children is to harvest spirit energy called Remnant, because 2 of his own children died, and Remnant is like a soul energy that you can use to revive them somehow. But he dies in FNAF 3 because his son Michael kills him, so that this new character called Vanessa serves as like his new puppet to carry out his kidnappings after he gets turned into an AI construct called Glitch Trap, except it's actually the Mimic, and there's a new version of William called Burn Trap that is also the Mimic, except it's wearing a teenage girl's corpse and a bunny suit to look like Springtrap. Most of this is from one game, mind you. Why? Why did this horror franchise become a sci-fi family drama narrative after the 4th game? There are so many questions being raised at once, and the series has lost itself in an attempt to satisfy those questions. I think most people who like FNAF nowadays don't even play it for like the horror aspect, it's just to keep up with the lore and storyline. I'm not against when a series evolves as time goes on, but when it's obvious that the horror aspect is focusing more on either adding more content or trying to explain its own convoluted storyline, I don't know, I feel like there's something disappointing about it. Despite that, I'm still going to be watching the movie, day one, but like, how are they going to do like the Vanessa shit? You know what I mean? Like, how are they going to do the teenage girl's corpse inside a grown man's you know what I mean? Like, how the hell are they going to do that? Okay, guys, this is going to be a long section. DC, what the hell are you doing right now? I could technically say the entire DC movie lineup is a Mortdecai Paradox within itself. I thought things were fine with the Batman and Joker, with the focus being put more on director-driven projects, but then they put out Black Adam and The Flash, which tried very hard to bring in a cinematic universe like Marvel. Wake the fuck up, guys. After the absolute shitstorm that was Warner Brothers having a chaotic meltdown over creative control on like half these movies, and James Gunn becoming CEO halfway through the production of Flash, I figured the answer was obvious. Just reset the universe. This movie is literally based on a comic where the whole storyline is based around resetting the entire status quo. This dude obviously wants to do his own thing, so just reset the universe. The problem is that Warner Brothers still feels like people want to see a cinematic universe, but they also want to do Flashpoint. But they want to establish that there's a new universe because people hate cinematic universes nowadays. The production of this movie was a fucking paradox of filmmaking, not even regarding the fact that Ezra Miller was over here summoning the 7 Dragon Balls so we can forget that they're a fucking criminal. Let's do a rundown. First things first, I wanted to please Snyder fans because the last time they didn't do that, there's a stronger call to action than there was for some actual political issues. So they got Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill to film some scenes, but Cavill's scenes got cut because James Gunn was going forward with a new Superman. The original idea was that The Flash would effectively erase Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill's characters from existence in favor of Superwoman and maybe Michael Keaton. And we all know this because he was filming scenes for Aquaman, and the fact they even used Michael Keaton at all for this movie was basically just a bone to throw at Batman fans, since most of them don't even like Ben Affleck's Batman because he literally kills people. They changed this though because they weren't sure if they wanted to keep Henry Cavill or not, and they still wanted there to be a Flash sequel which would adapt the events of a comic called Crisis on Infinite Earths, whatever that is. Even though the CW Flash show already did that apparently in that story and involved the DC cinematic universe, so they backtracked on all of that and settled with an ending featuring George Clooney because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
And the graphics that's really what this is all about.
You can't really please everyone with a movie that essentially serves as a reset and continuity for an entire universe. You're gonna have to accept that people will be disappointed that they're seeing these characters for the last time. What you shouldn't do is backtrack on your own concept in favor of cameos or faces that people will recognize, because whether you like it or not, people are starting to realize that that shit is lame. Warner Brothers' obsession of trying to gain admiration from as many different groups as possible is what killed this movie, if you ask me. Why the hell are you trying to please Batman fans in a movie about the Flash? This is coming from a guy who believes that Keaton is the best Batman, but why the hell is he even in this movie? I thought the whole point of the Flashpoint is that the Batman that Flash creates in the alternate timeline is like a bad Batman. Like a Batman who shoots people and has no morals. The Flash essentially creates a universe with a better Batman, and I guess we're supposed to think he's in the wrong for this? The Flash initially started as a movie that would bring everything back to square one. But now it's just seen as the movie that thought it would be okay to bring dead people using CGI for cameos. Seriously, what the fuck is wrong with you? Now, this whole time I've been talking about bad movies and shows that just so happen to experience the Mortdecai Paradox. I feel bad saying that because I know there are a lot of people who really like Kenobi or the recent FNAF stuff, but you guys got to at least hear me out when I say that the lack of focus is really what brings these pieces of media down from their true potential. Now, what if I told you that the Mortdecai Paradox didn't actually have to affect only bad media? I present to you God of War. 2018's God of War is probably one of the best games to come out of that year, and if you really think about it, the concept of it is kind of stupid. God of War is a hack and slash franchise where the coolest thing to happen is punching a big ass dude. And God of War 2018 and Ragnarok are mostly narratively driven adventure games that serve as a character study for the main protagonist, Kratos. Let me ask you something. Who the fuck plays God of War for the storyline? Despite that complete contradiction, these games are still awesome. Balance. That's really the main theme of this video. The new God of War games work because there's a good balance between what makes the franchise so great and the new focus on narrative. Everything I just talked about today isn't conceptually bad. Like a narratively driven Obi-Wan Kenobi show of Darth Vader could work, it just needs a good balance of those two concepts. You can have The Mandalorian and the Boba Fett show, you just need to balance the two characters. Plenty of horror franchises have convoluted ass storylines, but you just need to juggle that with what makes the series scary in the first place. And The Flash just sucks dick.